parent of a musical kid. Like, what? Which one would that be? Okay, Kelly is asking to be. This meeting to order at 18:08. Thank you, Jam, for getting us up online and everything going. Really appreciate that. Our first item is an agenda review. Does anyone have anything that they see that they need to move around or any adjustments that need to be made? No. I just want to say something to sort of lay some groundwork for this evening. Sure. One of the things for the strategic plan is that we have made a vow, should it be passed, to run more efficient meetings. I would add efficient and effective. I thought effective might be a good word to edit with. And in light of that, I just want to make a few notes about what's going to happen this evening. The strategic plan will guide all of us going forward, and we're hoping that we will be able to approve it this evening so that the school-based building can happen as in the weeks prior to school starting and throughout the school year. Wanted to say advance thanks to everyone who worked on this, and huge thanks to all the people who gave input in the various forums that we had and just from talking to everyone on the street. The second is there will be results of a parent survey from the spring of 2023 that went out in May. Will be discussed. This survey is an extension of the strategic planning survey that happened in the spring of 2022, but it focused more on the costs associated with the cost of doing business and being a student in our district. I think that would be the best way to describe it. That survey will be used to guide the strategic planning process going forward. It will be available to all the building level work, and it will be discussed during the committee report portion of this evening. So that's why you don't see it listed specifically. It will be under committee reports. The third item of business is a new hire for the SAU, and we are hoping we need an up or down on that this evening. For all of these discussion points, we are limiting the presentation to 10 minutes and hoping to have the discussion be 20 minutes. And just really trying to stay to that. And hoping that everyone did some advanced reading so that you can come to the discussion with questions and take the pressure off Jay to go over every detail of the strategic plan, and off Ben, who will be presenting the survey results, to go over every detail of that, because it was 69 questions, and take some pressure off Jamie or Jay, who will be presenting about the new hire. So just kind of wanted to put that out there as we start. And as that was said, any comments from the public? Hi, Linda. Our one in-person person.
No one online.
No one online. Okay. So moving right along, Jay and the strategic plan.
All right. So attached to board docs, if you just refreshed this evening, you'll see the most recent draft, and that this draft contains the suggestions that the board had at our retreat, and also even included some minor edits that the strategic planning committee offered at our meeting last night. So it's hot off the presses, and it represents a lot of editing and revision over the last several years. By way of history, for anyone watching this, in May of 2019, the SAU 70 board chose a single annual goal to create a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. I think I must have misunderstood. Maybe I thought you meant you wanted to take 3 to 5 years to make the strategic plan. We partnered with a consultant from the New Hampshire School Boards Association. We formed a committee and began to meet. And that process was the subject of our all-district back-to-school in-service the subsequent school year. And I used the metaphor of a hike through the White Mountains to describe how we take stock of our current position, choose our destination, and plan our route. I distinctly remember showing slides of the signs and cairns that serve as guideposts to keep hikers on the right trail, even when conditions change, and equated those to the benchmarks and outcome measures we build into our plan. And then, of course, conditions did change, and we reacted to the pandemic. We set aside our planning effort until we'd weathered the brunt of COVID. And through the years, we worked with staff, students, parents, board members, administrators, and members of the larger community to develop both our portrait of a learner and our strategic plan goals. We used 3 separate and extensive surveys to gain insight into our school community's priorities, and I think all told had over 1,200 different responses. Should the board approve these goals and this portrait tonight, each school and the central office will use them to organize, implement, document, and measure our initiatives in the academic, student support, facilities, and organizational dimensions of our school system. We'll use the plan and the portrait to hold ourselves accountable to the broad commitments that we've made to the principles of equity and sustainability. We will also use the plan to coordinate and align the substantial work that we've already accomplished, including our equity policy, the Hanover High School Climate Action Plan, school-based planning efforts, and the reliable and thoughtful work of our long-standing institutions such as Council, CSDC, and each of our schools' deliberative bodies. In the weeks ahead, we'll generate specific time-bound strategies that will set the course moving forward. And I echo Lisa's thanks to everybody who took time to share in the effort, whether it was serving on one of the committees or simply filling out a really lengthy survey. And that's really it. You've seen the goals many times. I believe that Ryan attached a link to, it's not live yet, but it's a draft of what some of the content will be on our strategic planning page on the website. It's just about ready to go. The strategic plan steering committee gave me some suggestions for some edits on graphics and so forth, which we'll incorporate. There's certainly some things to proofread, and then in addition to what we'll post on the website, I've purchased a software tool called, I guess it's Asana, which is really a project management tool. It's used in a lot of public and private organizations, and so far I'm really excited about it. It's going to be both a tool for us to communicate in terms of carrying out various tasks, but also to keep a running record of how we're proceeding against our goals. And I don't know how much more I can say about this. I'm really excited for you to vote. I hope vote for it.
Any comments from the board on the strategic plan? Neil.
So I think one of the things that might benefit the board, and actually several of the board's committees as well too, is there are a lot, if you look at the measurable outcomes in these things, there's a lot here, right? And I think that it represents for this body perhaps a change in the way that we handle things, particularly as to what we determine goes into a meeting's agenda, and that we might be well served to take those measurable outcomes that we say that we're going to do, right, and add them to the agenda templates so that we make sure that we do that. And I think this could apply at the full board level, but also there are some subcommittees as well too. Because I worry if we don't do that, we're likely to sort of continue business as usual and then not follow up on these things.
Jay.
Point well taken. And what will happen next is we already have like year 1 activities either underway or being planned right now. So I will, in my report moving forward, be reporting on our progress against strategy, right at this point, strategy development, but also our attainment of outcomes. I hope to work with the spec committee to build in progress against the strategic plan as a major metric for my own evaluation. And the buildings already have an established goal-setting process that commences as soon as school starts again. And now they'll have a full set of these goals to help guide that work. What will be helpful with the agenda planning template is when we've stretched these things out over a 5-year period to figure out where we anticipate being on achieving those different metrics that we've listed as outcomes. They may not all be annual. It may be some are going to be at year 3, some might be at year 5. So I think we'll be able to do just what you're suggesting based on that.
No, I agree. And I know, yeah, not all of them are annual, but some of them are, right? And so, for example, like when it says, you know, the board will receive an annual report, I want to make sure that we adhere to our own strategic plan, right? And so make sure that it's in the agenda planning template so that we know, hey, it's coming up, we better get ready for it, we gotta have it ready to go, and then at that meeting it shows up and we have a chance to review and you know, stick to our own strategic plan.
Amen.
Point well taken. Anyone else? Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to Jay and to everyone who worked on that strategic planning committees, because I wasn't one of them, and I know you all worked really hard, and I appreciate all the work from
Thank
the
you.
committee members and the public who participated.
Great. Any comments from the public on this?
Oh, can you let Garrett Pullman as a panelist, please?
Oh, good.
And Kelly has a comment.
Kelly, hello. Thank you, Kelly. Anything else? Anyone else with any? Oh, Jay, sorry.
I was just going to say, to your point, Kelly, what I read was the first paragraph of the cover letter that will accompany the document when we finally print it off.
Yes, Kim.
So I know this has been mentioned before as far as this is kind of like a constitutional strategic plan where it's a living document, and you know, and I will reflect that, I guess to Neil's point, there are a lot, right? It's a lot. And so I guess what I'm saying is I'm open to hearing as we kind of continue through the monitoring and if we need to tweak or condense to, because you know there are similar themes that kind of exist in a couple of the pillars, right? Professional development, for instance, or others. Just if I guess what I'm saying is I'm open to some consolidation as we kind of live and learn this.
Yeah.
So.
Or possibly some measures aren't very measurable at all.
Yeah, or yeah, I guess
Yeah.
I'm open-minded to
Right.
adjustments.
Yeah, I think that's a good reminder. It is a living document and we should feel free to change or to adjust as needed. So, Ben.
I think the academic one has a goal like that, like the ability to change upon consensus, but we should have something like for the entire thing, not just the academic one. Who's near the bottom?
Jay.
This is maybe getting into the weeds, but the cool thing about this asana program is that I have so far set it up so that all the goals are loaded in, and then the goals are assigned to the person, whoever the administrator is in charge of each of the 4 areas. But the system it cuts across. I can't help but think in woodworking metaphors, but like the grain in oak, for example, has grain going all different directions, and so we have a lot of the outcome measures and even some of the goal statements overlap and sort of intertwine. And so I'll be sure to give each group proper credit when they have something that maybe touches both academic and student support. And I'll make sure I work that into my reporting on this too.
Yeah. And I will tried to get it for tonight so that I could say everyone's names out loud, the people who served on all the committees, and couldn't quite gather it in time for this, but I'll make sure that it is reflected in the minutes for this meeting so that there is a public record of every single person who spent a lot of time in this process for us. So want to make sure that their names are saved for posterity's sake. So, and again, thanks to everyone. Okay, seeing no other comments? Great. Moving on, business requiring action. Yes, Deb.
I have one quick correction for the June 21st special meeting
Yes.
that I did not attend because I was away and I'm missing. So just minor, but
Okay. So whoever makes the motion can say as amended, if that would be helpful.
Deb, isn't that correct in that you weren't present, so you're not named?
right, but it says that Kim was absent and it doesn't say that I was absent. That's all.
Oh, I see, and then not present.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
You
So
are.
you're neither absent nor present, nor
not
you're
there.
just there.
I was out of the country, maybe that's why.
And actually, on that note, Kim has mentioned that not present for one of them, but not the other one. So we'll need some consistency on that.
Okay.
Oh, I think I abstained.
It says you're not present, which is,
Different.
yeah.
Okay.
Whatever.
Rick.
Move to approve items B through F by consent as amended.
Seconded by Deb. All in favor?
I have to do individually.
Oh, we do. That's
Kelly
right.
and Garrett.
With Kelly and Garrett on time. Okay. Starting with Neil.
Odell, yes?
Hartman, yes.
There, yes.
Tryman, yes.
Costa, yes.
Christie, yes.
Keeney, yes.
Nelson, yes?
Johnson, yes.
Let's go with Kelly. And great. All of it passes unanimously. We now have a strategic plan. Thank you, everyone. This is really kind of fun.
Yeah.
And thank you in advance to everyone who now is going to have to do the work of implementing the strategic plan. So we know that we've just put a lot on the buildings, and in advance, thank you again for. Yeah. Thank you again for your help making sure that this is a living document that helps us create the best school system that we can. So, moving on. Report of the chair. I think now that we're sort of in the middle of August, I just want to say a thank you in advance to all the teachers, staff, parents, students, everyone who's getting ready to prepare for the 23-24 school year. I am really looking forward to seeing what happens this year, and I know there's a lot of work that's going to be happening over the next 3 weeks to make sure that we're ready for the doors to open, and then a lot of work that will be happening over the next 10 months to make sure that the school year succeeds. So just a thanks in advance to everyone who's doing all that work, and we're excited. We're here to help you, so please let us help. And then the other thing, speaking of agenda planning, we are going to have an equity report update at the October SAU meeting. We were going to do it this time, and we moved it to October because there was just a lot on this agenda that felt important and worth discussing, and we didn't want to tire everybody out and have equity get a short shift. So the October 23rd, 24th, I can't remember, 24th meeting, we will have a report from Jay on the work of DEIJ in the schools. So just didn't want to lose that. Okay, next up, committee reports are next. Kind of thought we'd do the superintendent report, but no. Are there any other committee reports besides the defunct costing committee or strategic planning committee survey report? Does anyone have anything to say? Kim, do you want to remind everybody when budget processes get started? I know we haven't met yet, but.
Yeah, so I mean, we have our kickoff meeting. We have doodles around to try to figure out the best.
I just saw
dates.
mine.
So hopefully we'll have a kickoff meeting in the next couple of weeks. And for the most part, we're looking at a September, all the regular September board meetings to have the board look at and approve board guidelines for the budget. In general, so this is SAU 70, right? So SAU
Right.
70 kind of gets approved by the board first because then it gets put into the other district budgets as an allocation. And so it kind of needs to go first, otherwise all the other numbers change. And so SAU will be sooner than the rest.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, those committees. That's a lot of work over the next couple of months. Any other SAU level boards that have met? Nothing from Kelly and Garrett. Okay. We are now going to turn this over to Ben, who will be discussing the parent survey that went out in May of 2023. And there's a lot in there, and really want to make sure that people have a chance to ask questions. And what I would most be interested in is sort of what struck people as things that we need to keep in mind or important, or that you have further questions about, because that would be helpful to know.
Thank you, Lisa. Given the newly implemented strategic plan, I will be turning on my stopwatch. Go. So as we've all talked about, this was a long survey, for some folks painfully long. It was 69 questions. It was open for about 2 weeks. In May, we had responses from 556 parents, and Jay and I will present school-specific findings to each individual school at a later time. There were 31 free text response questions. We got over 2,500 specific, tangible responses from parents, and we thank them for that. Several of those responses were very helpful for us. Some were a little too specific, and Jay and I went through it and redacted things as needed. Several of them were quite funny. Several of them were quite heartbreaking, and I encourage you to read them when you have the time. It is 124 pages, so bring the coffee, but it is fascinating. I hope you would find it interesting. So given the 10-minute time frame and the discussion we'll have afterwards, I'm going to be very overarching. I think the biggest takeaway, which we don't even have to look at a slide to see, is there was a consistent trend for every question that had sort of, is X thing financially problematic in any way? Roughly a fourth to a third, in some cases even 40% of parents said yes, this is financially difficult in some ways, and at some points extremely financially difficult. And I think that, at least for the folks who were administrating the survey, was a lot higher than we were anticipating, given the culture and stereotypes that people probably have about Norwich and Hanover. So I think that's something we need to keep in mind for future things. There were also several comments that taxes are extremely high, and a lot of people feel that way on the anecdotal free text comments, although we do note that the tax rate here on a per dollar basis is actually lower than many of our surrounding communities, so we want to keep that in mind as well. In terms of specific questions of note, like I said, I'm parsing this down from 31, so I'm going really 30,000 foot level here. But the vast majority of the parents are here for this, are here because of the schools, either specifically or one of the main reasons. Over 50% said it is the reason. I'm in Hanover or Norwich. And one thing that I think Jay and I are particularly struck by, and this is on slide question 5, if folks are following along, is you can't necessarily add this one together because it's a please select all that apply, but we can see that roughly 2/3 of parents indicate that there might be a potential need for tutoring for things that they are being taught in school, and about 40% have or did get tutoring for their child, which might be a lot higher than people thought it would be. This is the first time, to Jay and I's knowledge, that this level of specificity was asked of parents. And in the free text questions, people had many opinions about why they were doing it, as well as many things that they're getting tutoring for, many of which I didn't know existed. So I thought that was fascinating as well. What are my other things here? Secondly, the mental health component of this was very surprising, and that is question number 13, if you're following along, which is less than half, just over half of people say there's no need for mental health or behavioral health services for their kid. Just half. And there's approximately 22% of our kids are actively getting mental health or behavioral health services right now, either in the school or outside the school, or in some cases both. An additional roughly 15%, or actually it's 20%, are actively trying to get services for their kid. That's on top of the ones that are already getting it. So if you think about that, that's ballpark half of our kids are in mental health care or are actively trying to get it. Yes, Kim, I know I'm rounding in my head if the numbers are slightly off.
It's more on the context. If I believe you could select more than one answer.
Not for that one, you couldn't.
Not for that, okay,
Correct.
I just was trying to clarify.
So
Yeah.
for some of the questions in bold at the top of the slide, it will say please select all that apply, and that one was one choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But some of them have that. And Lisa has time for questions after the fact as well.
Yeah.
Additionally, for extracurriculars, we have very high participation rates in extracurriculars, as high as roughly 90% for athletics, and a little less than 50% for performing arts. And we had a other category, which meant different things to different people, so I'm not really gonna talk about that in detail. And my slide deck just froze. So now I'm going purely by memory here.
It'll fix.
Here, use mine.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And then, how do I go down on this, Jane?
There you go.
Okay.
Just use the arrow.
Yeah. In terms of the actual dollar amount, which is something that the board suggested we added after the initial presentation, I think the middle category, and this is one of the later questions, I'm skipping a lot of the stuff in the middle for now for the sake of time, was people estimated ballpark about $500 to $1,000 per year per kid. And with a tangible minority doing $1,000 plus, or in some cases $2,000 plus, again, per year on top of taxation, with many folks considering that that was too much, both in terms of dollar amount, but also in terms of complexity, in terms of like all the different fees that added up. I presented this to the strategic planning committee yesterday, and we spent a lot of time noting that gifts to teachers was a lot more requested than we had thought it would be, which is question 45, I believe. I'm sorry, it's not 45, it
49.
is 49, thank you. I'm not getting there yet.
You're there.
And also, if for the folks looking along, 49 was too big to fit on one question on one slide in terms of the visual aid. So if you go to the next slide where it's a list of numbers and response rates, and that's 2 pages long.
It's in more docs.
And let's see here. There was a lot of discussion yesterday about the pressure question, which is number 53, which is, do you as a parent feel pressure to pay these costs, which are theoretically optional? And the biggest source of pressure was from the school community and culture, which you can look at that in a couple different ways. One could be, oh my God, that number is huge, 45% of people reporting pressure. You can also flip that, just like you can for all these things, and say, oh, 55% of people did not report pressure from the school. So it's, we can kind of read into this as we want, which is not necessarily a good thing. And let's see, what else do I have? And one of the questions was about a proposed financial aid system that kind of be like a 503C that would actually have sort of just like the Friends of X sport that we have, be similar in theory where parents could help chip in, or as could outside organizations for things like March Intensive, for things like financial aid in general, or specific other activities. And I think that got some support from the strategic planning committee itself as well. If anyone else who was there yesterday wants to clarify or forget anything I forget, please let me know. Jay?
I think it was 45% of the respondents said that they would contribute to a fund like that, so.
Question 59. Yep. And then with additional folks being, sounds like a great idea, although they might not contribute.
Right.
And that one, to Kim's point, is a please select all that apply, so someone could have filled in both or not have answered several. I think that's probably it for me, for the overarching stuff.
Oh.
Yes, Deb, please, what I forget?
The one thing that I think that you forgot was the clear need for better communication.
Yes.
From athletic teams about the cost of the team, from the classroom about field trips way in advance. This is what it will
Upfront,
cost,
beginning of the
all
year.
of that.
Yeah.
Over and over again, it shows up in the 129
comments.
In the free
pages.
text comments, yes.
Yeah, that communication can be better and should be better.
Right. And with several powerful stories about like where if I had known this was going to happen halfway through the year, halfway through the sport or something, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And like I said, there's some powerful stuff in there, and I urge us all to read it and keep it in mind, but also noting, of course, that the PowerPoints, which is all the shared questions, is more people, more data than some anecdotes that are powerful, but looking at the quantitative numbers is helpful as well. So that's why we did quantitative and qualitative for those who are in the field.
And I think one thing Ben noted yesterday to the strategic planning committee is the breakdown of who answered is sort of, it hits the breakdown of who lives in Hanover, who lives in Norwich, and who lives elsewhere. It also hits the breakdown of the number of students in the high school, the middle school, and the elementary school. And we also talked about the fact that when it is broken down on a school-by-school level, some of those percentages are going to shift dramatically. I mean, for instance, the middle school and the elementary schools don't have a March intensive, so they should have 0% complaining, talking about the costs of March intensive.
Right. And for those who are looking at the exact numbers of responses on the PowerPoints, if you multiply that by roughly 3.5, assuming it's a normal distribution, all the statistical stuff, which we saw no reason it wasn't, that would be actually the approximate number of people who theoretically would feel that way or would answer that way. 9 minutes, 49 seconds.
Well done.
All right.
So we are now open to comments and questions from the board, and I think Jay wants to kick us off.
I just had one, this is really good information, I think, for us as a deliberative body to just better get to know our community. I thought one of the things that was pretty remarkable was that on question 64, which is the highest educational attainment of a member of your immediate household, almost 53% said doctorate or equivalent. Another 30.25 masters or equivalent. That is so opposite, like the average
country.
for the country. It's amazing.
And one thing to keep in mind in a stat sense, that this is not the same, not necessarily the same population of the people we did last year. There's about 50 plus more people. And someone noted yesterday that on the strategic planning survey from last year, it actually was 88% of people had masters or above. This year it's 83. And so did we get dumber as a community? Was the joke that was made?
Less credentialed.
I'm doing a quote. That's not necessarily the same block of people. And so, like, for example, the gender distribution actually changed quite a lot from last year for several possible reasons.
Tony.
Ben, I may have misheard, but I thought you said that in most questions, or many questions, 40 to 60% of people expressed.
I said about a
difficulty.
fourth to a third.
A fourth to a third.
Yeah, so kind of 25 with the one extreme, close to 40%, depending on the question. And that was me just ballparking in my head, but it's
Okay.
roughly
Because it
a
seems
fourth
like
to a third.
Many of them are actually
Where are you looking?
significantly less than that, but I'm sure it varies by question, so it's not.
If you're looking at a specific one, we can go to it. Okay, Kim?
What, or maybe
sorry.
to help answer, was there one question you were looking at, or a couple of questions in particular? I'm just trying to circle the square on this one. Ben, for you to say a quarter to a third, like what questions were you looking at?
Oh, just all the questions that we went through yesterday as a group that had any sort of, how difficult is it to do X?
Like the sports questions
Yeah,
and
sports,
the arts questions.
Arts, ability to pay March intensive. So this is not the philosophical stuff or the how do you feel about it, it's more just, was this challenging for you? And now I'm frozen. If you're looking at a specific one, Kim, we can go to it.
Oh, well, I was just trying to help.
Okay.
Because I heard two things, right? I heard it was less, and then I heard that it was more, and I'm just trying to look at a question to get a sense of.
I'm looking at question 5, and
I
it's
refreshed
no
it.
too expensive is 10.69%.
Question 5.
Question 9, 9.62%. So I'm sure it varies, and there's high.
Oh yeah, so the tutoring one is a little bit more, yeah. I was referring more to what Lisa's saying with athletics and performing arts. Yeah, good point.
Yes, Jay.
I think the other one, question 39, I thought was interesting too, because we asked about caregiving during breaks, and I think Ben included a question in there about even our Wednesdays where we have our early release. And so in that one, it was, let's see, about 28, 29% that it presents financial or logistical or both types of challenges. Yeah, there's just I agree with Ben that there's just a lot in here, and it's nothing that's earth-shattering, but just like when we had our conversations in the equity committee about the prevalence of different things, like I won't say I had an argument, but we had one member of the committee who kept insisting that since our equity survey indicated that 90% of people felt like everything's equitable, the whole point of that was that there's 10% who don't feel like they're included, and that was so. I think as we interpret the data, I think we got to take a look at each question, really put it in context, and who knows what this is gonna, I mean, I think having this knowledge will help us to be mindful at least when we're making a policy decision or we're deciding on an initiative. Or it'd be great to like have this kind of a conversation and some real thoughtful analysis before we have to vote on the March intensive offerings, where this kind of comes right up into our face each year.
Deb was next.
Something also that it's not quantitative, I don't think. I mean, it's not one of your top 11 items that you went through. But something that really struck me in reading through all the questions that we may well want to be thinking about in terms of curriculum, it's the number of people who felt they had to hire or they did hire tutors not to allow their child to be functioning at grade level, but the assumption, well, you've got to be above grade level. And then what that does to kids who are at grade level, perhaps whose parents don't want to pay for tutoring or can't afford to pay for tutoring. So this kind of thing about what it means to be average in a class and the driving push to be above average and everything, and what that costs parents. I don't know that we can tease that out. People are going to hire tutors if they want to, no matter what. But I think it does bring us to, I think we should have conversations about curriculum and curriculum expectations, or the schools should have those conversations, I think would be.
Yeah. And I think to then Ben and Neil, I think if you add up, it presents financial difficulties and it presents logistical difficulties. Those are often financially based. Like the logistical difficulty is, in order to afford to live here, I have to work full time, or like I don't. So it's more of a quarter to a third have a barrier of some sort, whether it's logistics or financial. They didn't necessarily name it as financial, but there's a reason why they would like to do something, but they cannot. And that just feels important to think about too, because there are assumptions being made. So Ben and then Neil.
And to Jay's earlier point about equity, questions 15 and 17 get into healthy meals and technology is needed for educational purposes, and about 1% of kids have trouble getting nutritious meals for financial reasons, which means roughly 20% of our kids are in that frame, and about 40 kids do not have access to technologies at home that they need for schoolwork. So that is a small minority, but that is still far more than it should be.
Neil.
Two things. I think one of the last things we just talked about is important. I wouldn't mind having some time, whether it be at an SAU meeting or a Dresden meeting, and if I were to go so far as to sort of maybe, if I gotta pick something out, pick March intensive, right? Because I do think that there's a discussion that this body needs to have about, not isolated to March intensive, but that's just the one that seems to come up every year, and I would argue, like, why not start there? But not to say that that's where we also end, right? Because I think the conversation would go on beyond that, and I think it's a conversation that's more than just 20 minutes at a board meeting. I am a little overwhelmed just by the quantity of the data, right? And I'm paralyzed because of that, to be able to feel like I can do anything meaningful with it at the moment. So I do think that this is one of those things that the board is going to need to just come back to on a frequent, periodic basis and look at it and be like, what does that mean? How does that impact then what we're doing here? And how does it influence the decision-making process? But the particular point that Deb made, I think, is a good one, and it struck me too, because there was a line in the strategic plan dealing with curriculum that said that we would view our curriculum using a bunch of different lenses, but one of them was that it was grade level appropriate. And I keep coming back to a statement that you have made several times, that we have kids going through the system coming out of the elementary grades above grade level, right? So when I look at that in the strategic plan, does that mean, wait a minute, are we changing our current curriculum such that in the areas where we might be teaching above grade level, we're gonna bring it down, And coincident with that, is that then the phenomena that's going on in the elementary, middle, and high school for kids getting tutors, is because we're really not teaching at grade level. We're teaching at freshman college level, and that's why, or that is one of the reasons why the tutoring thing becomes then so prevalent in our district.
I don't know who had their hand up
Well,
first.
I
I'm gonna
was
let Jacob first.
To the question, I guess to the question, so this is one of the things that in all of our conversations about equity, it's tricky. The statistic I cited from the survey about the educational level of our community just means I mean, when it was a different board, but when we had a retreat and I asked the board to put their heads down and raise their hand if they were a National Merit Scholar in high school, and everybody just about raised their hand. We're not in a nationwide average community in terms of educational attainment of our parents, and so it's not a big leap that our kids are really strong learners. They're very intelligent. And you come into ninth grade if you're an average reader coming into ninth grade at Hanover High School, average reader by national norms, you are 4 grade levels behind most of the kids in your class. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that from a self-image perspective, if you want to talk about social emotional, or you think about it in terms of the advantages you'll have later in life, you almost have to make the argument that, yeah, but you're in this place that's really high powered academically, and so you're going to rise to the level of the people around you, and it's got a net positive effect in the long run. But there is so much that weighs on kids, whether it's keeping up with the sort of socioeconomic status or being able to hang academically. There's a lot more pressure, I think, in a situation like that than in other environments. And yeah, that does have to be a big part of our thinking. But I think that, really, can we solve it? This is a national problem. Your zip code, where you live dictates where you go to school. And if you live in a place that's affluent and highly educated, you're going to have advantages that people in other places don't have. And so we have to embrace that and then figure out how do we then make sure that within our community there aren't people that are unnecessarily disadvantaged or who don't have the opportunity to feel good about themselves and find success in some way. And I'll get off my soapbox.
Ben.
In terms of your March intensive question, Neil, there were many comments in the free text part about March intensive, many positive, many negative. Although it wasn't the only trip that was mentioned a lot, there were a lot of comments about a Virginia trip and about a Montreal trip. Many of them actually far more negative than I thought they would be. And so there's definitely going to be a lot of things we can use from this, not only from the free text qualitative stuff, but also from the people who think it should be taxpayers, the people who think it should be individual parents, and the people in between. There's a lot of useful information here, and we can actually compare what these parents feel about who should be the taxpayer versus parent breakdown for travel, for sports, for performing arts, like all those things. And they do vary substantially by how it's asked and what they're asking about. And to your second point, which I think I might have already forgotten what it was, they'll come back. Okay, I'm done.
Neil.
Yep. So first, to Jay's point, actually the thing that I might be curious about, and it would depend on whether the board would support it or not, is the analysis of, in our current curriculum, like, for example, in 3rd grade, are we really teaching 5th grade level material? Or is it just that what you explained before is just the nature of the student body? Is that that's where, like, because if that's the case, like, if we really are teaching, 5th grade level material in 3rd grade, I mean, that I think is something that we could look at and talk about, right? Versus the softer things, which are, the conversations we have in the classroom are really 2 grade levels above, but that's just because that's where the kids are. It facilitates that sort of thing. So, sorry.
Well, can I answer that one first?
To the chair.
Yes, go.
I was just going to say that's a yes, but I feel like it's less prevalent than it was when I first got here, but there definitely were classrooms that I visited where they were teaching out of a literal, like a 5th grade book in a 3rd grade classroom. But what we're working on now, I think most of the schools are working on what's called differentiated instruction in one way or another. And that's something that I don't think we really had as much need for, and so it wasn't like a big professional development focus here, as it has been in other districts. And what that presumes is that you do have a grade level curriculum, but you have built into your instruction the ability to extend the learning for students that are taking it up quicker and with greater facility, and that you've got built-in supports for students that are struggling with the material. And you're able to handle a mixed ability classroom with content that's grade level appropriate, and then to push the students who are strong learners, or stronger learners. There were a number of comments, if you read through some of the open-ended stuff, that people feel like we need to focus more on students who are gifted and students who are accelerating in the curriculum. And I saw that a lot in some of the responses to the parent surveys that the schools do. And that's a tough one. I've had not arguments, but disagreements with former board members about the concept of tracking, for example. That's really a basic tenet in any discussion of equity in most places. But there are folks that feel very strongly that we should be tracking, that there should be the super honors class, and even council had this debate. So that's something we got to keep having that debate, and we got to keep talking about, like, what does it mean to essentially segregate learners by aptitude to learn? Do you do that? Is that right? Or do you detrack and make sure that you're providing that differentiation in the single classroom?
Deb. Oh, sorry.
You had a second.
Oh yeah, part two. I forgot you had a part B. I forgot Jay did part A. Go Neil.
Okay.
Part B.
And to Ben's point about, so I appreciate, I think some of the data in the survey, especially when it got to the philosophical questions about who should cover the costs, I found it interesting to a point, right? I do think that there's a discussion maybe that this board or the Dresden board or Norwich or Hanover should have, right, is what is the purpose of a public school system? Like, what goes along with that responsibility, right? Because to a certain point, I actually don't care what the majority of my town thinks philosophically about whether or not the cost should be borne by taxpayers, because I think it's inherent to the public school system as, Jefferson designed it, right? And here we are in 2024 almost, right? Like, what does that mean?
And I think too, with that question, it's one thing to answer it that way on a survey, and it's another thing to actually pay the bill.
Right.
Yeah.
Your response might
Well, and I
vary.
would argue your survey went to parents.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
By definition,
Yeah.
and that's one thing to point is that white parents are obviously a substantial amount of the town. They are I don't know the breakdown exactly, but they're not the majority, obviously.
Yeah.
But
Jay.
So one of the questions in the survey that really gets at this is the question about special ed and 504 services.
Yeah.
And because, and that kind of gets to the heart of the question you just asked. It's many more parents than I thought reported that they either aren't getting what their child needs, or they're having to pay extra to have extra reading instruction or whatever it is. And
question 11.
And the difference there is that, like, this federal law, like, mandates that we provide a free and appropriate public education to students with disabilities. It doesn't say that we have to provide the best possible education to our students with disabilities. And so in IEP meetings, there's always a tension between the parents who want comprehensive services, everything from mental health to academic support, and then the school system, which is going to say, well, this is what's appropriate. So there's always, that's a great place to look at that dynamic and think about it, then maybe extrapolate that to the entire system to get to the answer to your question.
We have a few more minutes if we're going to stick to our new rule. So Deb.
That's fine. I just want to play a little bit of the devil's advocate in response to the concern about tracking. As someone who taught AP English and honors American Studies and worked with enormous amounts of reading and complicated and difficult reading, and there was no problem with a student being in there in the classes, but sometimes there was a need to counsel parents about the appropriate placement. And one of the best analogies, I am complimenting myself, that I came up with was a parent who was insisting that her child be in my class. And I said, but think about this with skills. You know, you don't take calculus if you haven't achieved a certain level of ability before that in math. But where I really got her attention was saying, you may want your child to play varsity soccer, but if he does not have the skills yet, if he cannot play as well as other people, if he's not as fast, if he's not, you know, you wouldn't expect the varsity coach to put him on the varsity soccer team. And I think as a community, there are probably way more people who would absolutely agree. Your child can't just say, I want to play on the varsity soccer team and be expected and expect to be on the team. But many people think my child should be in this section of a class and we'll just work hard and we'll get a tutor. And so somewhere there is, you know, people don't object to auditioning for a part. And if you have an incredible voice and you get the role, somebody else doesn't have any credibility for saying, well, I should have gotten that, even though I can't carry a tune. So I think in some ways, this community is really good about understanding that there are skills necessary. And in other places, they're not. That's all I want to say.
Some varsity coaches might disagree with your analogy.
That's true, but you know, there aren't 50 kids
Right,
on the varsity
I
side.
just was kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah. Yes, Michael, and
Okay, and
then
then we have
Ben,
1
and then
minute
we'll
to go.
finish. Yep.
So as one of the newest members on these boards, what sort of lessons do you think, what problem is it designed to solve? And like, what do you think as more experienced members I ought to take from this survey?
That's a slightly big question. I think it would be sort of what is surprising, what is not surprising, but most importantly, what is actionable? Like, what are some things here that we need to respond to, noting, of course, that this is a subpopulation of a subpopulation, parents who responded among parents, amongst taxpayers. And the biggest thing that I saw, and to contradict Jay slightly, was the only one that I saw that was like mind-blowingly surprising was the mental health question, which, if I'm talking about question 13 for folks who are looking, which is not a please select all that apply. So these are all separate answers where 22% of all of our kids are actively getting mental health treatment as we speak, almost a fourth. Another 10% used to. Another 12-ish% are trying to. And then what should we as a board do about that, if anything, noting that the mental health of our students and across, you know, that's, people have said epidemic on its own, and we are in a town that many people perceive have the resources to do something about it. And what are we doing, and can we do more? I mean, I know people in the field locally who are providers, and they are also at their wits' end with, you know, year-long waiting lists. I'm sure we all know people who have or need or are in the field. And I'm personally speaking as an individual, I would hope that we can step up to the plate and help out in some way. That was my biggest surprise takeaway.
And at the very least, acknowledge that this is happening and this is a need, and that it might be affecting what's happening in the classroom, and provide the teachers with some sort of support for that. I mean, at a bare minimum, yeah.
I'm gonna suggest that perhaps you were surprised because your children are younger. It's definitely
fair
not in
point.
the least bit
Let's
surprising.
not bring
Yeah.
my individual family into it.
Enjoy it now while it's a surprise.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I wasn't as surprised by some of the answers about the barriers and how many people for whom cost and logistics are a problem, because I hear a lot of that, like, and maybe that's because those are the people that tend to talk to you. So, but
While
kind of fit.
noting that, of course, compared to other towns, and, you know, doing some stereotyping, but like in a town where many people have the means to afford that care, many of them have the logistical ability to take time off or have a flexible schedule or can make time happen
Right.
compared to other towns. If we're having this kind of trouble, what about all the folks around us as well?
Kim, and then I'm gonna end this.
Well, I was gonna try to take a crack at Michael's question.
Okay.
So, kind of how I see, like, how would I use this information, right? It's one data point, a lot of data
At one point,
points,
at one point in time.
right? But I'm gonna summarize it to one
Right.
data point.
And it's from May.
And and I think you'll hear common themes throughout the year when we have meetings. We talk about things like March intensive specifically, things like the budget, policies. You know, there's a lot of themes that kind of pop up, and if you kind of think, well, philosophically, maybe some appreciate some questions more than others, right? But if you kind of think, well, philosophically, what do some parents think about a particular topic or this issue or that kind of thing? I use this as one data point, right? But it's not the only data point, right? And we all have our own experiences and preferences. And so that's kind of how I would see it as I'm, thinking about the budget. There's some questions in here that we're thinking about, things that I think have dollar amounts tagged to them in the strategic plan. Things like that will kind of help determine priority and just kind of relative need. So that's kind of what I'm taking away as.
And then, maybe on to that is what in this makes you want to ask further questions? Like what strikes you that you'd like some more information? That's important to think about too. And I just realized we have not given the public a chance to talk. So we have one member online and one member in our midst. So Linda, please come forward and
Hi, everybody. Linda Dante from Norwich, Vermont. Also work at the high school and been a part of the Ask for those that are listening. I've already shared this with Lisa. Just a little bit of context here, I'll go quickly. 2007, there was a Quality of Education Committee, SAU committee, that did a lot of the work that you have taken, I think, a step further here. And part of that work was part of the sort of base for looking at data points, as you pointed out, Kim, was looking at like 4 different areas. Victoria Bernhardt was the person we used as a resource at that time. So you look at demographics, you look at perception, you look at school processes. In other words, that whole idea of when you're in the classroom and you're trying to do differentiated learning, what kinds of things do you need to know? And then student learning itself, which a lot of times is the hard data points, but it's also formative, right? As well as the final summative assessment. So there's a lot of data being collected. The point is, when you have multiple sources of information, you get overlap points. And specifically, when you give the schools their very specific information, that's going to allow teachers, okay, and also administrators in those schools to look at specific areas where students might not be doing well, along with what our commitment is to differentiated learning and sort of the whole equity question, to really hone in and do specific things in the classroom. So while this data seems 30,000 feet from the way you presented it, Ben, it actually alerts, I think, teachers in the classroom to struggles they may not have been aware of. And in a very busy day, you don't think about those things. So I just want to say kudos to you all for shining a light on these, because I think it's going to help us all do better work. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think I'll now take up Neil's suggestion that this is part of an ongoing discussion that we'll be having, because we will be having a strategic planning update at every SAU meeting. And it feels as if this survey should be part of that discussion. So no further comments from the public?
Quick comment, just in response to Linda. Thanks for the kind words, Linda, but I just want to clarify that my 30,000 foot comment was more doing a 10-minute summary of the whole thing, not the survey itself. Okay.
Yesterday, you went into a lot of details. I wish somehow we could have filmed that as well.
And to that point, last year for the strategic planning survey for last year, which like Jay mentioned, was an entirely different set of questions. We did have, I think it was called a community forum or something like that, where we invited the public and select board and board members were invited to in this room to have let's talk about this one by one, and I did that, and I think we had roughly 30-ish members of the public, which is far more than we typically get, as we can see, but we wanted even more. But we're hoping to do school by school stuff throughout the year, I think, right?
We'll be referring to this and other things. So I'm going to close our discussion for now and move on. There are no more committee reports, correct? So we're good. Assistant Superintendent report, are you doing Robin's? Or?
She attached it, I think.
Okay, yep.
Board can read it, see where she is on her curriculum work.
So that is attached. Are there any questions that anyone has from reading that report for Jay, who might or might not be able to answer it. I'm not gonna put him on the spot if he can't answer them. Okay, great. Moving on to the superintendent report.
So I feel like I've spoken plenty already, but I will say we are in. It's so interesting. I'm sure people have the perception that when school's out for summer, there's not a lot going on around here. But I can say for sure that people are scrambling. We still have some last minute vacancies we're trying to fill. The business office has been exceptionally busy, even busier. They're always busy this time of year because all of the systems that we have, everything from payroll to all of our accounts payable stuff, everything has to be shifted over onto a new year. We start a new fiscal year, and all that work has to take place, and we're doing that again with our sort of. I hate to call it wing and a prayer. It's but Jamie and the crew have been like just covering for each other, doing everything that they used to do with more people and more expertise in those specific areas, and they're doing a miraculous job. And I guess I'll use my report as a way to tee up what we're going to discuss next. And part of our strategic plan under the organizational effectiveness piece, there's a specific outcome in there to redesign the business office with an eye toward the future. And I believe Jamie has a really solid plan for doing that already in the works, which will make sure we document and include as a strategy under the strategic plan. So we get credit for time served. And I'm just really, really proud of the work that Jamie and her crew are doing. And it's been kind of neat, in a weird way, to watch people attempt to help who really aren't equipped to help, but just there's a real sense of our desire to be helpful, and we just got to work our way through this. But I think we're turning a corner tonight, maybe.
So you teed up Jamie quite well, although I'll point out that for this next report, her business administrator report, it's about the audit report and the budget meeting timetable, and then we move into non-public to talk about the potential hire. So Jamie, take it away with your 3 attachments.
So I'm not gonna dive through it line by line just because of the time and the fact that the next item's far more important, I think, than anything else in my realm right now. So the audit went fine. There is a governance report there as well.
Yeah.
The only thing they pointed out, and I think that maybe in all the shuffle of the personnel not being here that's normally here finalizing the audit, they probably just didn't get a copy of the investment policy that we I know all of our 4 districts update. So I didn't see that when they originally finalized the draft, but I'll email them, I'll write back to them so that they can fix that and finalize it again. But that's the only finding, was that they didn't think that we had revoted our investment policy, which is not a finding really, it's just a point.
A note.
Whatever, it's a note, right. We knew how much money we were gonna be ending with in surplus, the $166,000, and that was taken into consideration when we built the budget that we're operating under right now. So that was already carried in. And then we're gonna discuss that. I did, for our next discussion, because there are multiple changes going on in our realm at the SAU office with multiple positions. I did update that for the board in the executive content that we're going to discuss, but that surplus was carried into that number, and then all of the expenditures were updated, and it will still, will still be okay. So, and then the other attachment is the budget guideline, updated, and this is updated as of today. So if you saved the last one I sent, or the first one I sent, if you're on the one of the "can we make a meeting" team emails, disregard that one, because thanks to Della at the Ray School, found an error on one of the dates for January. For the January hearing dates were wrong. So we've updated that, and then I had a cell reference that didn't carry with the date, just had the cell in there. So that's been fixed, and Ryan has it, she's gonna review it too to make sure we're not bumping up against any holidays that we shouldn't be, or observances. So take a look at that, we won't go through it tonight, but if you have any, if you're on any of those teams or any of those meeting dates and they don't work for you, then just let us know, we can maybe move them. There are doodle polls out. It looks like Hanover will be best suited for next Wednesday from 4 to 5. I sent him an invite for your calendars. Thank you for that. And then right now Dresden is trending for a kickoff meeting on Monday from, I think, 4 to 5. I'm gonna let Tara take a look at that because she might be able to zoom in.
Yeah, I can't at that time.
Okay, all right, so maybe we'll take a look at some of the other ones, Tara, after you get a chance to.
Okay.
Okay? And so that's where we're at on that. I'll get the quick models done for Dresden. To Kim's point, it makes more sense if we have them both done at the same time so that you can reference them when you're looking, you know, to make some decisions on each of the districts. And I could not get Dresden's done before the Hanover meeting that we were gonna try to do today. I think that's it with regards to that. We'll have some other information to share at those committee meetings that we'll bring back to the board. We'll hopefully have the guideline for Dresden back to Dresden maybe by the 22nd, I'm not sure. We'll see where that comes in at. And then SAU, I've already trued up the last one, so it should be pretty easy to maybe do an early projection of what we're looking at for the next one.
Okay.
So maybe we can have that one too before we, you know, kick off in September. You might be able to have an idea of what that might look like. Because, you know, that one doesn't change a lot, right?
Right.
It really doesn't. I think most of the personnel changes that we would have been bringing to you have already been brought. So it's just a matter of truing it up and, you know, bringing it one more year out.
Okay.
So it should hopefully be pretty quick to do that.
Great.
I don't think SAU doesn't have any projects going on other than, well, actually we do, other than strategic plan, which is awesome. And then the Bureau Veritas report. We were hoping to bring it tonight with them with a presentation, but we couldn't get it finalized, so we're shooting for the 22nd, the night of the 22nd. Just waiting to hear back from them.
With a special meeting before the Dresden meeting.
Yeah, yeah, so they can do a presentation of the reports.
Great.
Finalize. We, you know, we're just waiting for them to get back to us, and then our schedules between the three of us were just crazy this summer.
Yeah, so
Projects are on course, though.
that's a good reminder, just a heads up that there will be a special SAU meeting before the next Dresden meeting for that report, and that's it. That's the only agenda item, so. Thank you. And
We'll be sure, I don't think it's a problem if we share those, although there'll be some updates to them because they're still in draft. If we share those with the budget committees at least, so they can have them and have a discussion.
Okay.
I don't care, I share them anyway, they just, you know, they're in draft.
Any questions for Jamie? Deb?
Well, it's Jamie, it's maybe not Jamie, but when we have the Veritas presentation, can we let the environmental science
Absolutely.
group at the school know about it?
Yep,
Yep.
and the folks with the Sustainable Hanover.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
No. There's also an energy committee in Norwich that's loosely,
yes.
there's like it's not affiliated with the town, but it does a lot with the town, so they might be interested as well.
They're pretty close to the Sustainable Hanover.
Yep. So we'll make sure they're there as well. Okay, any other questions for Jamie? Nobody down there? Okay. So can I have a motion to go into non-public session, please? Bueller? Deb?
I move to enter into non-public session at 7:17 PM under RSA 91-A:3. Is it just plain old 2?
C.
Huh?
2B.
2C.
2C or B?
B is hiring.
Oh,
B is
2B.
hiring. Yep, it's a hiring thing. Okay, so 2B. May I have a second, please? Michael? And we can just, we do have to go online because we still have Kelly. Yep, okay.
Thank you.
So, let's start with Rick this time.
Johnson, yes.
Nelson, yes?
Keeney, yes.
Christie, yes.
Costa, yes.
Simon, yes.
Barry, yes.
Thank you.
Hartman, yes.
Odell, yes?
Kelly? And Garrett. Great. We will see you in non-public, everyone. And And may I have a motion to approve the hiring of the finance director?
Lily wants to do it.
Lily wants to do it.
Move to recommend hiring Teresa Taylor as a 1.0 FTE finance director with administrative amendments as presented.
Legal review, great,
Legal review as presented.
perfect. May I have a second? Deb. Let's vote. Do we have, yeah, we have them back online?
Can you
Yes.
move them both to the panelists?
We're moving Kelly and Garrett over. They'll be there by the time we get to it. Neil.
Odell, yes?
Hartman, yes.
Very yes.
Simon, yes.
Costa, yes.
Christie, yes.
Keeney, yes.
Nelson, yes?
Delozer, yes.
Johnson, yes.
And Palm? Palm is not there yet? Oh.
Okay.
And Garrett? Okay. Great, unanimously approved. Welcome to Teresa. We hope.
She'll start coming to meetings with me right away.
Perfect.
To learn budget and all of that.
Well, good luck with extending the offer, and we look forward to meeting her. So,
And there's no public.
there's no public to address the board, so we will skip that part. Agenda topics next meeting. It's not until October 24th, so you have plenty of time to think about what you want to talk about. There will be the equity report. There will be a strategic planning update. Other than that, send ideas to me 10 days before the 24th, so by October 14th. And may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
Michael? And a second from Lily. Let's vote, starting with Rick.
Johnson, yes.
Delozer, yes.
Nelson, yes.
Keeney, yes.
Christie, yes?
Costa, yes.
Simon, yes.
Very yes.
Hartman, yes.
Odell, yes.
And Kelly left.
Kelly is gone, but Palm? Great, thanks, everybody.